Good evening and welcome to Hot Topics from the Soul. I'm your host, Dr. Valerie Parker Hagan, and I'm delighted to be here with you tonight. We are continuing part two, the families in crisis, but tonight we're going to talk about the children. What about the children? Have my co-host with me.
And good evening, Dr. Jared Cookman. I'm so glad to be with you here on this beautiful Tuesday, the first Tuesday in this month. We're springing forth, but as you said, we're continuing on with the crisis in the families and particularly addressing children tonight. What about the children? And I think we're going to have a great discussion. We have a great guest that will be able to lend a whole lot to this subject matter. And I'm quite sure if you know a family member, a parent, a family, you might want to tell them to tune in to this because the fact it's going to be both insightful and very much inspiring.
Absolutely. Parents in general are going through so much emotionally and mentally, trying to hold it together, trying to function even prior to the pandemic. Families were getting hit with different things, from relationships to jobs. And then the pandemic just added another stress level. And, when you're trying to survive, I remember when I was going through my domestic violence situation and stuff, I was just existing. I wasn't living. I became a robot just getting through day by day. And it's a miracle and the grace of God that, my children were so in tune with me and that we kept that open communication going where I was letting them know where I was mentally and emotionally so they wouldn't stress me out even the more so. But a lot of family dynamics aren't built that way. They haven't laid that foundation where it could roll out that way because when you're going through a domestic violence situation, everybody goes through it. Everybody in that household, the children go through it. That's why the statistics are high on learned behavior, how they become products of their environment because it's learned behavior. So, we have a special guest tonight. I'm so excited about her because, we've had the opportunity of sharing the stage on many occasions. And I want you to introduce our dear guest tonight.
Dr. Val, it is such a pleasure in having our dear guest tonight. She is our guest. She is the president, the founder, you name it, the whole producer. She is the voice. She is absolutely the advocacy specialist strategist of the House of La Billionaires. Now, just let that roll off your tongue. House of La Billionaires, and where she's specializing in dealing with people in every situation, not only trauma, mental health. She's right on the verge. She's finishing up her doctorate this fall, dealing with not only psychoeducation, counseling, family dynamics and crisis. She is an activist in every sense of the word. She actually combines all of her strategies, all of her different disciplinaries come together, and she creates not only a platform to be able to produce healing, but a platform to be able to produce, if you would, strategies. And I am glad to call her my friend. Years ago when I met her, and after talking with her for about 2.5 hours, our first conversation, I knew then that she was an unconventional individual. And it's my pleasure to welcome tonight to Hot Topics from the Soul, another other than Miss Sabrina Harris, the CEO, founder, president, strategist, producer. And I do that really with all sincerity because she doesn't wear just one hat. She does it all. So she's got productions going on. She's got shows going on. But everything she does is always with this whole thing in mind of empowering. So Sabrina, welcome tonight to Hot Topic from the Soul.
Welcome. I almost had to look around and see. I'm like, who is this person? I want to meet her.
Yeah, I tell you, you're an extraordinary person, and I had the chance to meet you on several occasions, and I thank you for taking the time out of your hectic schedule to join us here this evening to share information to empower and inspire. The children are going through different situations, and we hear about the children at the border, but we got children right here that the focus has shifted, and we need to be more aware of what's going on in our homes, what's going on in our families. I also like for you to share a little bit about your story, where you started from how you became as grand as you are in making sure that people live their best life.
Thank you so much. I was listening to your introduction, and I actually took from it that everyone goes through it. And that is the symbolic statement as it relates to mental health. No one is untouched by it to a degree, because you said it is an offset of everyone that is in the environment, which is very true. For me personally, I'm just going to do a light introduction because my story goes very deep. But the basis of this starts with me being abandoned in the hospital at birth. Many people know now because I started to open up about it, but I was born in Hillsborough, Tampa, and I was abandoned in the hospital. I would come to find that substance dependence and some other things were going on inside of that situation. And I'm actually I have petition reports, and I'm working my way through finding my biological family. What I found going along in life was that the abandonment issues followed me into my teen years when I'm trying to figure out relationships. I didn't realize why it was such a pressing need for me to be relational, and that if I found that it was functional or dysfunctional, I clung to it a lot of times to my detriment. But coming out of a domestically violent and abusive situation into a marriage, it literally almost took my life. And God, I had that epiphany. I talk a lot about purpose now because I realized that it was there when I was young. God led me into the field committedly. And my charge was to be a safe place for his people, particularly those that have been victimized and traumatized, because I understand it very well. So that's kind of the synopsis in a very short version of it all about me.
It is true that our pain becomes our power.
And that's exactly what happened. So
if we have the courage, because so many times we go through painful situations and it haunts us through our lives, where we get stuck in life and allow it to bury us and entomb us emotionally, and we put ourselves in an emotional prison because of our past. So I'm so glad that you arose to the occasion and decided to break the barriers to move forward with your life and give back, instead of staying and not being able to share your power, your truth as you relate it through life. Because a lot of times we get embarrassed about where we've come from.
Absolutely. And I thank God for giving me not only the mandate and being what he needed to be for me to carry it out, but I have to be honest. 2013, I went through this series of shifts. It was to leave where I'm
hearing a little bit of a feedback from you.
Okay.
It's in an echo. It's kind of okay.
Let's see. Is that
okay? So talk a little. Go ahead.
Okay. So back in 2013, there was a shift, and I was led to do an exodus out of the professional situation I had been in for about 16 years at that point. And I was given a vision for the House of Love Billionaires and things that I was supposed to do in the nonprofit industry and all of that. But I was resistant at first. I was really still dealing with myself. Residual trauma was evident. And I was kind of hesitant about doing it and questioning myself. So I thank God that he gave me the strength and courage to be able to do it, and that he allowed me to press forward, because now I really realize I didn't understand my calling at that time, but now it makes perfect sense for why he called me and allowed me to be an authentic representation of this moment. So I think all praise due and given to God.
One of the things I say, Sabrina, is that I'll never forget my first conversation with you. And as you begin to literally just pour out of your heart and pour out of your spirit, really reciting to me the vision of where you felt that you were being led to. And in the midst of it, it was as if you could literally see, it's like, okay, this I've had to deal with, that I've had to deal with, the other I've had to deal with. But no longer are these things going to become my, if you would, my shackles. They're about to break off because of the fact I have discovered what is needed. I have discovered what is the antidote. I've discovered what is needed in order to break these chains off of me. And you kind of went on from there because, first of all, who ever heard of a name La Billionaires? Most of the time people have to break it down in syllables to even understand it. But I think that's a safe place because you talk about love and you talk about the richness of really love. Oftentimes the world see dollar signs as being, the key to happiness always. But you discovered through all that you came through that really love was really the most important ingredient, the most important resource, the most important commodity that we could have. And my question to you tonight is the fact, how do you feel, in your own words, how did it come all together to recognize the fact, you didn't want to call it a treatment center. You didn't want to call it, necessarily, a halfway house. You didn't want to call it any of those things, but you encompass everything that you have been given in that one word, House of the Billionaires. How did that come about, and when did you know that this is it?
The vision from God was very specific. I would wake up and I would write them down as they were given to me. And the first component was a house. And I remember, like in a vision, God showed me that I want you to walk around your home. And I got up and I was obedient and I walked around. And he said, every room in this house has a purpose. He said, but they don't cross over each other, meaning you don't go in the kitchen to go to the bathroom. Or you don't go in the bathroom to go into the laundry area. It was very clear that healing is done so in components, but you have to have different variations of it that come together. So the house concept was built in that way, where you had the counseling, the therapy, the therapeutic part of it. We also have the wellness, the support groups, all of the pieces that come together, because that's what I found inside of healing. We don't do it in one dimension, it's multi-dimensional. So to have all of the pieces together, and if it's not readily represented inside of our house, we establish connections, it is the role model, it is the example of total healing that we need today. Because I love when Dr. Valerie said earlier that you're looking around, especially in this time during such intense crisis. I had to go to the family systems to really help my clients, because I may have had a child sitting before me who was in crisis and having issues, but it was an extension of the home and the people around him or her, the school environment. There was not one dimension. And I'll give you an example. I pray the audio is better. I just wanted to check in with you, Dr. Valerie. Is it a little better?
It's better. It's coming in and out, but it's a lot clearer where we can hear what you're saying.
Okay. All right. Because I don't want to make any more adjustments and cause any problems. But this is an example just to bring this full circle. I've been blessed with a family of 3 siblings. And these 3 siblings went through throes of trauma, adverse childhood experiences, anything that you can really think of inside of abuse, abandonment, and neglect. It led to termination of the parental rights, and these children were adopted, all of them together, thankfully, and I've been working with the family for about 2 years. The oldest sibling, he began to regress in his behavior. His primary diagnosis is ADHD, combined type, but there's an intense emphasis on anxiety. Anxiety is a real issue for him. So when he's faced with different things, there's been a question mark on him whether he was autistic or not. And I was able to do evaluation and take that question mark off. Shameless plug to Autism Awareness Month. But his regression led to withdrawal. He became verbally and physically aggressive. He was doing all of the things that he did initially when I accepted this case that he had triumphed over. So I get the telephone calls, I get everybody's up in arms, oh, we need to adjust medication and do all of these things. And I had to pause everything. But what I did was I brought the whole village together and I said, listen, I want you to think through this because we're now a little bit a year into the COVID-19 pandemic. I said, these children, but this child in particular, has been through how many adjustments? Online school for a period of time, over the summer, different setting there, back into school for a period, back off. The whole family caught COVID-19. They had to quarantine together. So he was back online. So he was unable to adjust. He was completely overwhelmed. So it was situational and circumstantial. It was not that he needed more medication or anything like that. What he needed was somebody to just embrace him, to love him, to make special considerations for him. We got him put in a creative classroom environment. Mom was taught how to do specialized things for him at home, and it worked out famously. So it's really about recognizing what is going on with the individual child or adult, but also looking at the environment and seeing what, if anything else, that we can do. I love the scaffolding concept, where you see a building going up and they put scaffolding around it to protect it and everything else. And that's what we're doing in a time of crisis as we work through how to get you to a place of stabilization and how to keep you there. So I'm going to pause for a moment.
Yeah, that is powerful what you said, because see, people on the outside looking in and they're like, well, my home is great, my child is just acting out. But there's a reason and a purpose for all things. I was talking with a young lady today and we were talking about, how that we have different organizations that are fighting and struggling and wanting the Black voice to be heard, the children to be heard. But we have to be able to lay that foundation for them to actually be able to function. I talked about, you have these children walking around with their pants hanging down, and it's okay for them to curse in front of you and be hanging out with their buddies, drinking and smoking, coming in any hours of the night. So it's stuff that's just cycling and building up and building up and building up. And I think that if we don't participate in the lives of our children, we are going to lose them. We're going to lose them to the streets, like my grandmother used to say. They're going to be lost to the streets. So you need to take charge. But what happens when you're weakening emotionally, where you don't have the strength to take charge?
That's a very insightful consideration. I'm hearing that.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's great information that's coming forward. Maybe as you're making a few adjustments now, because not only was that a powerful question, we're waiting on the answer, because that's exactly what we're dealing with. As parents, think about it. As parents, we're expected to have answers. As adults, we're expected to know how to do things. And yet, it's still in this pandemic, we're all being confronted with things that we've never been confronted with before. And so, what we discover is that whatever we've had in our toolbox up until that time is all that we have in our toolbox. And yes, we say that if the only tool that you have in your toolbox is a hammer, everything looks like a nail to you. So you go trying to bam, bam, bam. But it's hard to bam, bam, bam when you got all these other things coming at you. And so now we're in this pandemic, in our coping skills, what we have to draw from, all those things are being called into question. And if we don't have much, I like to call it, we have nothing but a shallow box anyway, we have very little to draw from. So now we have the things that we're facing. Our children are facing things. We seem to be without answers. And talking to our kids, we seem to be without answers. So now it's overwhelming. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, who's running the place? The child or myself? When I feel empty, when I feel like I don't have anything to say. So I'm gonna turn it back over to you, because I just thought that was a very thought-provoking question.
It is. And I want to say this, and I pray it lands, and I want you to really think about this for a moment. Yes, it is very important to use what you have. And when you know better, you do better. But I pray that this pandemic alone has opened eyes to the fact of it's really unveiled how unprepared we really are and how much we need to do to position ourselves in a better place. And what we have been kind of forced to do is do that inside of a crisis. So, one of the things that I have emphasized to parents is not only making sure that you introspectively do inventory with yourself, that you be very honest about what's going on with you inside of relationships and whatever else that may be, but also support systems. You have no idea how many times I've said and asked, okay, let's go through your support system. And routinely speaking, most individuals will say individuals who are in the house, who are in the throes of their own lives, and not really able to handle anything else on their plate. So I said, why not be resourceful? What about church? Still there. What about community programs? A lot of people have had to put their pride aside and do things that they never would have done before. What about mental health counseling and intervention? What about support groups? Many of them are online and doing famously well, providing beneficial support in education. So if we stop looking one dimensionally as it relates to the support systems that we have in place, it is feasible that we can do a lot more because the best outcomes achieved inside of living are not done alone. Even inside of family, we don't do it alone. And that was said earlier. But I love Dr. Murray Bowen, who is the author and the creator of the family theories system. He talks about how we impact each other inside of a family and how if we don't rectify each individual situation, collectively look at all of ourselves and work as a unit. He even has a concept of a triangle where the two strongest go to the weakest link inside of that triad and support each other instead of us looking across at the individual and saying, well, what's wrong with him or her? They're so weak. Why can't they get it together? Why can't they pull it together? It's identifying what's going on that is not appropriate, dysfunctional, or unhealthy, and it's seeking to do something about it in a uniform and structured fashion. No longer can we wing it. No longer can we or should we continue to use ideals and things of old that are clearly not working. Trauma is a very intense and serious issue in this day and time. And it's requiring us to broaden our minds and do things that we've never done. We really need to
Absolutely.
start thinking outside the box.
Absolutely. Maybe you could try turning the volume down. Maybe that will help clear some of the static as you continue to communicate.
And I'm
But
also when I'm still a little bit better.
yeah,
Okay. How's that?
yeah, because it's really, you know, it's just like parenting. You can have so many parenting books of how to, but there's nothing that prepares you for the real thing. There's nothing because you have different personalities. That person that wrote that book is reading, wrote from their perspective of what they've established. But when you have the reason why we're doing this show, What About the Children, is because we are dealing with several different dynamics of children. They come from low income, middle class, um, uh, wealthy households, and each one of those homes have problems. Each one of those households has children that are in distress mentally. So how real is mental illness in the homes, Sabrina?
It's very real and very prevalent. I am so sorry. I think
And you know, it's real and it's prevalent, but a lot of times when you say something to a parent, well, I think something is wrong with your child, the first thing they say, ain't nothing wrong with my kids. He ain't nothing. You trying to say my kid is retarded? And that's not the case. So I know, Dr. J, you work with a lot of young people too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Sabrina will agree that oftentimes parents will get defensive because they automatically attribute, anything that we're saying that may be wrong or something that may be not quite right with their child. They almost attribute it to as if you're accusing them of not being a good parent or you're accusing them of some form of neglect, and that's not always the case. I mean, the reality is that we recognize, we observe, we see signs, we see symptoms and things. And so we are asking questions because of the fact something's not adding up. Now, the real reality is this, is that a parent has a choice. The parent has a choice to be honest and say, well, my son or my daughter has gone through a series of things, or, this is a recent event that may have happened, something traumatic have happened, and, and they're adjusting, or, they haven't quite been the same. But because we have this need to portray the perfect family or portray that everything is all right, we rather be in the negative. We'd rather put on our blinders to what may be really happening to our child. But we all know that denial doesn't cure a person. A person being in denial, and I'm not talking about the river on the other side of Egypt. The person being in denial does not, that doesn't help their kid. That doesn't help the situation. So when parents take on that attitude, for people who try to help them or who'd like to offer help, it's already difficult because they've already put up the defense. They've already basically said, no, you're not going to get what you're trying to say. You're judging me. Not the case. You ought to be glad that people love you enough to recognize the sign, that people love your kid enough to recognize the fact that something's not quite right. And it's difficult. It is difficult because the child loses there too. If the parent is turning a blinded eye to signs, symptoms, turning a blinded eye to events and things that their kids have been exposed to or go through, if they're turning a blinded eye and not seeking counseling, not seeking help, not seeking prayer. I tell people prayer and then some, not seeking those things, then they're really doing their child a disservice.
And it's not all the time like, oh, the parent is doing something wrong or the
Right.
home is wrong. You have so many different dynamics of outside influence because, you go to work and your child is left home. There's neighbors around. The children are more into technology, so they're on the computer every chance they get. So they confronted with bullying there, and they get influences there and want to experiment there. Then when they were going to school, they had to deal with bullying and their sexual identity because you had sexual predators at school trying to overpower and take over the mindset of your child. So there's a lot of different dynamics going on, and I think maybe Sabrina, I think you should be able to shed some light on maybe some signs that the parents should, pay attention to. Um, Even if they're quiet, if their mood changes, if it's not that, oh, they just acting like that, oh, she's just shy. But maybe you can give some insight of some warning signs that something may be festering with your child.
I would definitely say behavior. When a child is no longer listening as he or she does.
I know we on the right track of addressing this issue because you're having audio problems and we were good, prior to checking, and now that we're trying to get the information out, then all of a sudden this technical difficulty, but we're going to bind that right now that it's
Right.
coming forth. In the name of Jesus, we need this
Yes.
message out because there are parents that are listening, that are waiting, and want to know what they can do and should do to empower not only their child, but themselves. We ask for help not because we're weak, we ask for help so we can stay strong.
Absolutely. And I pray as we go over this, what I want to say, and I hope it translates itself is that looking at your children is important, but it's also important for the adults and caregivers to look at themselves. One of the things that we impress is that when we are at our threshold, when we are burnt out, when we are overwhelmed, when we are not functioning well, there's either an escalation or a de-escalation, fight or flight. We either go away, withdraw, seclude ourselves, or we emotionally and behaviorally escalate. We start acting out, we start saying and doing things we did not customarily do. So a lot of times it's checking in and having a conversation. A lot of times I tell parents at least 15 minutes a day. If you can try to do that, not only collectively with your children, but spend independent time with each child. There's also the thing of having family time. But and it's not just because I'm a mental health professional, but I strongly encourage that there should be some level of mental health intervention. It should be a given. Family therapy, some type of routine support, because typically all children fall on the spectrum of some type of intervention, even if it's not diagnosis or medication. Support groups, they'll welcome if there's a specific area. You have the mentorship, one-to-one or group. There are a lot of different options. A lot of times, children are not communicating their concerns directly to their parents or caregivers. But if you have interventions in place, if you have activities in place, if you have other individuals in place that they connect with, a lot of times things are revealed more readily and more fully. The escalation into ER visits and ultimately inpatient Baker Acts and all of those things have been very profound with young people. I want to say that self-injurious behavior, suicidal ideations, the influx of substance dependence to cope and all of those different things, it leads to maladaptive behaviors when people don't understand how to function and cope. And if the parent doesn't have that ability or understanding, you're absolutely right, as Dr. Thigpen said, there's no way that they can pass it along to their children. So I explain to the parents, you have to start with yourself. You have to be honest with what's going on with you. We have conflict in the home. We have marriages and relationships that are falling apart. We have children that are being exposed to this. We have parents who either are not working, stressed out about bills and finances, or they're working a lot of hours to make sure things are met. So there's a gap there with the interaction with their children and whoever may be keeping the children or the children are keeping themselves. So when you look inside of this and you break all of it down, I tell all the families, we're looking at this individually and collectively. But I impress upon each parent, and this is my buy-in with them, that to do the best by your family and your child, especially one that's seated before me, it's going to require you to commit to this journey. It's going to require you to be accepting of what other may be going on with you and allow us to help you so we can help the child. A lot of trauma that was supposed to be temporary and dealt with and overcome is residual into adulthood. Many people are still dealing with that. Many families are still in the throes of traumatic situations. I have dealt with children recently on the professional level who there is domestic violence and abuse in the home ongoing. We had to unearth that and we had to deal with that. So of course there was residual with the child who was trying to go to school, who was trying to stay safe, who was trying to navigate all of these different things. And we somehow expect that everything was going to be fine. What I come in and say is breathe. Just breathe. Just let's sit in this for a moment and let's be real about it. And let's put a face to this and identify what's going here and put it into perspective, because I learned an educated person is a powerful individual.
Yes, that is absolutely correct.
Before you know, when you really don't know and nobody's expecting of you, or you're kind of saddling your children and the next generation with what you've been taught, innocently enough, it's still dysfunctional. But when I see the light come on and I see the eyes brighten up, It makes all the difference in the world, because now I know that not only the future generations have an opportunity to heal and stabilize, but also the generation back a couple of years. My goal is to leave no one behind, but it causes us to look at all of the dynamics and understand how they work together. So whatever is going on in the home is relevant. Whatever emotional threshold is present or not present is relevant. Whatever behaviors you're seeing, whether it be withdrawal or aggression, whatever it might be, is relevant. But ask yourself, as a parent or a caregiver, am I checked in enough to even pay attention and sift through the ashes in the rope?
Wow.
And then enough and capable of really navigating this. And if you can truly say that you're not, it is my encouragement that you bring professionals in who can assess and do what is necessary. Because throughout this whole pandemic and before, help has been available. But in my beloved community and beyond, there are myths, there are untruths, there are blockers, there are all kinds of systematic breakdown, especially as it relates to mental health. Mental illness, to make that extension. Mental health is very different from mental illness, but I see people just marry them all together, and I'm like, that's not correct. There are synapses in the brain, so if different things are not working well and you cannot do select things on your own, sometimes psychotropic medication is necessary. But the goal is not to keep you on it forever. Catch this. The goal is to help you develop the skill sets, the coping mechanisms, the calming capabilities, the grounding, and the mindfulness, and all of these things that you can apply and do for yourself. So when it's not coming together full circle, it's no different than medical in a sense. When your body is not working right, you do what is necessary to heal. We have organic things. I just gave melatonin to a client the other day. It's an organic supplement that you can take to help you sleep. I take it and I utilize it. Why? As a mental health professional dealing with crisis, I come home, my body may stop, but my
your
brain,
mind doesn't.
it's still going.
That's
So
real.
melatonin works for me. Soothing teas work for me. So we don't always have to go right to medication. But if you haven't tried these things and ruled them in or out, we're all over the place. So here's what I do, especially in crisis. I come in with a calm and reasonable voice. I come in as a person who asks the questions and observe. Because a lot of people just take self-reporting. And I want to say this. People in crisis are not always able to give you the right answer, the correct answer, the truthful answer. And some people really don't want you to know how deep it goes. So you
Yeah,
gotta,
that's true. People don't want to reveal their scars or their hurt because they feel that individuals will think less of them or diminish them in some capacity based on what they communicate, which leads to why a lot of people don't go and try to get help mentally.
absolutely. It's determined that caregivers have mental illnesses, especially if they're severe. A lot of them are concerned that if I talk to you or I report to you, it's going to lead to my children being taken from me.
Right.
So
Which
there's
is a big reason why a lot of parents don't want to talk, because if you reveal to a caseworker of any kind that your inadequacy to deal with your child, they feel that they will be taken.
but if we review psychology, and I'm trying to go slow here, and we say, instead of waiting for this to break down and you solidifying having your children, seek the help and intervention that you need to prevent this. You see the message? And that's when people buy in. That's when they're supportive. That's when they're receptive. When I feel like you're an alliance versus you being opposite. So that's a very strong consideration. So
Yeah.
inside of mental health professionals, it's really how you approach people. It's how you treat people. I don't care how egregious the situation is, to be honest. I'm very respectful. I'm very patient because I know this situation being egregious means you need me more than the average person does. You need even more of me. And I also say this with no level of shame. I lead with God. I'm faith-based in my approach because I understand spirituality is a mainstay. Because of my past with victimization, I decided to use that as a basis for my thesis. And I'm doing research right now. And I decided to target the population of women ages 18 to 65 who've overcome just unthinkable, unfathomable victimization and traumatization, but they chose not to report it. And they also chose not to get professional help. I wanted to know not only why, I wanted to sit with them and not only hear their story, but I wanted to know what did they do? Because there is a pocket in society who's just not buying into mental health. We continue to try and everything else. So I wanted to know what we could do for them without leaving them alone. And the number one, 98.999% of the time, the number one coping strategy was spirituality. Oh, I prayed about it. Oh, I went to church. Oh, I fell on my knees and I got before God, and all of these different things. Many said music. The things that we have right before us that we minimize and we shove aside. People who have survived the worst. And I mean, I really listen to the stories. And these individuals, be it they had some residual trauma, they had managed to live decent lives. So we got to be willing to look at anything. My dissertation chair was thrown. She was like, I never thought of it. And I said, that's where we have to go inside of healing. We have to go to the places we don't want to go.
Right.
Go to the places where we've never gone. And we have to go to the places that may seem a bit odd, but you're looking for the outcomes. What am I changing? What's happening? Does it always have to be textbook or cookie cutter approach? And I would say no, because that's not how life is. It's no cookie cutter approach to living. And Dr. Valerie, what you need is not the same thing as what Dr. Thicklin needs or what I need. But let me give you this, and this is from my heart. January 29th, second surgery in the span of a week. I coded, and I left it. And God brought me back. And I thank him, I'm grateful. But what I looked at is what happened in between. Because my husband and family and everybody was like grappling. Because nobody expected me not to be here. So if I can give anything to you, it's to consider the oddities and the variables that you're not expecting. No one expected COVID-19. No one was prepared for it, to be honest with you. Not government, not schools or anything else. What did you see everybody doing? Grappling for a plan of action. But if we start looking at the oddities that are happening more often than not, I would say now we should have a solidified plan for epidemic and a pandemic. Not universally, that's for the government. But you as an individual, especially if you're a parent, if this should happen again, because God is going to heal our land, that's my prayer. But if this should come around again in a different form or something else happens, what's the plan?
Yeah, one of the things you said, and maybe you could try adjusting your volume again. One of the things you said was that a couple of years ago you got sick and you coded, and your husband and family they just couldn't imagine a life without you. I wonder how many parents actually are planning or have even considered the fact of what would happen to their child if they were removed from their lives. What devastation would they leave behind if they don't position themselves to put things in order?
It's a devastating reality. I think the might be lending to this, but
Okay, it did work. It kind of got even more distorted.
yeah. Okay. So I'm trying not to, but having a plan. Number one is life insurance. Many people have unfortunately passed away from COVID-19. I have lost 5 people close and personal to me alone. We now have burial funds through FEMA, which a lot of people don't know about at this point. But there was really no option in the very beginning. So a lot of people were tapping whatever resources the family had to bury their loved ones. Why? Because they didn't expect for this epidemic into a pandemic.
Right.
It is utilizing this as a benchmark. What do we need? I found out for myself with all of the things I do professionally, I needed to have a succession plan in several different areas or facets of my professional life. It needed to be very clear who would take over what and who would do what in my absence. And it was not, and it's something that's important. So, preparation, accepting the reality of the situation, recognizing when you're not the cure, but you can be a part of the solution. To be open and receptive to welcoming people into your life that can help you navigate the storm. To keep God first in all things, to pray over your children, and to teach them how to be self-disciplined. Many people have willpower to a certain degree. That means you know how to do select things and keep certain things from spiraling. We'll use eating or dieting in that position. Many people can go on a diet and be reasonably well. But self-discipline says, I look at all areas of my life. I check into who I am, my personality styles, my traits, my threshold for tolerance, and all of these things. And I make sure that I am disciplined enough to make myself, my healing, my wholeness, and a wellness a responsibility of mine. I say all the time, Dr. Valerie, Dr. Thicklin, you're great in your own right, but you're not responsible for Sabrina's mental health. You're not responsible for my wellness or my stability. And I certainly should not be projecting my issues. So for the adults to get that understanding, then they can pass that along to their children, because that should start very young.
Mm-hmm.
How can people connect with you confidentially to find out more about your organization and what services you provide?
I think you can have the email address on the screen, the counselor in me at yahoo.com. So pleasant play on what I do. But I'll give you my
It's called The Counselor in
in me.
Me, yahoo.com, because we're on different platforms and it's just audio as well as visual. So we want to make sure that individuals that can't see will know that the email address to reach Sabrina Harris is The Counselor in Me at yahoo.com.
And if I can also my telephone
They can email you
okay.
and get further communication information from you to talk so that it won't tie up your phone lines. And then also so individuals can reach out to you confidentially and you could respond to them and let them know what services you do have available to assist them. Because, the whole entire family is in crisis. I was in a grocery store, I talked about it a couple of shows ago, and this young mother, she looked like she might have been in her mid-20s, and she had 2 children. One looked like they were 2 years old, and the other one 4. And they were walking, and the little girl wasn't walking fast enough. She had the bigger one was in the cart, but the 2-year-old was trying to walk. And she looked back, and we noticed that the little one was lagging behind. She looked like a little duck just trying to keep up. And that mother turned around and called the little child a bee and a hoe and all this. And it just broke my heart. I started to say to my husband, be like, I always be getting in this stuff. And he was like, it's not your fight. But it just broke my heart to see that, because I'm like, she's only 2 years old, and this is how you want her to identify who she is. You're telling her who she is. In the Jewish community, from the time they're babies, they're taught who they are. And here you are teaching this child, saying what she is. You're calling her something that she has no idea what it is, but as she grows older, she's going to accept that when people start calling her that. And it just broke my heart.
I agree. We have a lot of work to do.
We have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. You know, we say things when we're angry that we shouldn't say. So, you know, this show is not to throw stones at anybody, but to empower you and to have awareness to look around. You know, we used to be where we used to look out for one another, look out for one another's children, not talk about them, not backbite about them, but we used to look out. We used to, you know, have dinner where we sat at the table and had family discussions, not just, you know, the food is on the stove, fix your plate. No, we had dinner. We sat down and we had conversations about life, how our day went. I think we need to get back to that. Get back to family dynamics. Even if you weren't raised that way, implement it. Learn who's sitting in your house, who's living in your house. Learn who they are, because they change from different ages, project different things. And like I said, there's so many outside influences, not just in your home. You want to make sure you lay the foundation inside so that they'll be able to survive outside.
You know, one of the things that you talked about, it goes back to when you're talking about back in the day. It's interesting. There was a certain pride that we had. It didn't matter how much lack we had or whatever. We identified. You know, we're from the South Side or we're from this side here. And most of those families there, they knew each other. They had children that were the same age. As a matter of fact, if we think about it, there's many families that literally the children grew up the same age. They were generational. You knew about each other. Parents looked out for others. My family and I, we have this laughing joke that we think of when we were small kids. And my dad was coming out to discipline us. And it was time for us to get in. And Dad just went to he took the switch, and he just grabbing kids by arms and whipping them. And one of our friends Shirley said, "Oh, Mr. Thickler, I'm not one of yours." He said, "You look like one." He kept going on. Well, the funny thing about that, her parents never did say, "Well, how dare you hit my kid?" It was never that. It was all taking the fact that we looked out for each other's kids, or we looked out for each other's family. And even as children, we had the wherewithal. If we sensed something was going on with Shirley or going on with off of them or whatever, we could say things like, "Mom, Dad, I think they're running low on stuff. Or they wasn't able to do this." And we may say it to them, and our parents would take it from there. They would take it from there. Well, let me go and speak to May. I'm going to check up on May. It was not from a sense of trying to be nosy, but from a sense of saying,
Caring.
Yeah, caring. How can I help you? You know, I still remember neighbors borrowing sugar.
Yes.
And I still remember us borrowing sugar. And it happened. No one looked at the other family as if you're, who you think you are. And I think that we've lost that sense of communication. Somehow or another, there's been this seed to breed this competition amongst us. And that if anyone seemed to do a little better than the other, here's this sense of envy that's going on. And then the crazy part, we'll put ourselves in debt trying to keep up with one another. That wasn't love. What happened to the fact that no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care? When we shared in with things like that. And I think that's what we have to come back to in this day and time. That there's some things that can only be solved by love. As we say, love billionaires, and and it can only be solved by love, and that's what we have to come back to as a society. Once again, your kids are my kids are your kids. I want the best for you. When we brag about everybody on this side. You know what I'm saying? Oh yeah, our neighborhood was the bomb. Boy, And that's the way we used to could brag about things. But today, that's not the case. In many cases, we don't even know the person who's two doors down. We don't talk to them. People are so transient. We don't see families in place that very long. I mean, 1 minute, the family together, next minute, the family's gone. And we all bear responsibility to some sense to be able to be that voice of reason, at least that voice of reason in that place where people can come. Because oftentimes children will come and say, Mister, can I talk to you? Now, why did they find that trusting? As recently as just a day ago, I had two young boys under the age of 13. They both were 11. And out of nowhere, they asked the question, did you grow up with a father? Did you have a
Wow.
father in your home? I said, yes, I did. But the next question was a black kid and it was a Hispanic kid. The next question was this: wow, how did that feel? You must have been very lucky. And I'm blown away because they didn't ask me whether or not I in my life with my children. They went all the way back to my childhood, and you could hear their pain. And this is what I heard two young boys say to me. They said to me, I don't care about my dad. If he was to come back around now, I would even accept him and everything because, hey, I don't need him. He's been gone 11 years of my life, left me just there with my mom, walked off before I was ever born. Why would I need him? And the other kid is saying, same thing here. All I need is my mom. My mom was the only person here for me, and I don't want to hear nothing this guy got to say because the fact for 11 years. And he walked off and left me and they ended up leaving my siblings too because he had two set of families. And I'm sitting here thinking these kids are equipped with a lot of built up, pent up anger, and
Yes.
also they know a whole lot that's what's going on. And here it is. So I try to take it another angle. Let's talk about, but what if your dad just wasn't ready then? What if he's come to his senses? What if he's, learned from his mistakes? And their resounding answer was this: well, it's too late now. He should have knew what he was doing before he messed around and had me.
Wow.
As far as I'm concerned, he abandoned me. And when I heard this, and this was said not from you didn't hear anger as much as you heard resentment, and it was like, that's it. And you think about kids hurting, they hurt in many ways. And we have to step up to the plate and understand that our actions also have consequences.
Wow. Well, Sabrina Harris, it has been a great show. The information is good. Those of you that have tuned in and are listening or had the chance to look at the show, go to the website, my website from the soulofawoman.com, and join me on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, so that you can stay connected, because Hot Topics from the Soul was created to be a lifeline to the community, to bring information, to keep you strong. As I said, we ask for help not because we're weak, but so we can remain strong, so we can get answers that we don't want to knock on a doctor's door to get. There's some information that you could practice at home. And I thank you so much, Sabrina, for sharing that. And those that want to connect with you, they can reach out to you, the counselor in me at yahoo.com, to talk to you directly if you want to exchange phone numbers so that they can be able to stay empowered, stay strong. And Dr. J, thank you for giving that, sharing that story regarding those young men, because, as single parents, you don't realize the effect of not having a father, good, bad, or ugly. They need that man in their life. If not that father, they need a strong man they can admire. So when they find a man in the street that shows them a little attention, rather they're in drugs or they're alcoholic, they gravitate because there's something about the human spirit that yearns for that dominant male spirit covering. Just like it is in us to look to God the Father, that spiritual being. We look to him because we know that we need that headship, we need that covering, we need God. And that's how it is for those young children. They need the reassurance of that protection, that cloak of fullness, that cloak of wholeness. It makes them whole. So thank you for sharing that story. And I'm sure that it's helped someone that's listened today so that they can be more aware that this is affecting my child because their father is not there, and maybe their grandfather could be more involved in their lives. Or, there's a program where
Mhm.
Big Brother programs. I'm sure they still have some decent brothers out there that will
Right.
tap in to be that headship, not to take over, but a positive influence, urban league, so that they can have that help that they need mentally and emotionally to be able to stand.
Absolutely.
Any further information you want to share, Sabrina? Can't hear you at all now.
Yeah, you're muted.
I bless your platform and I thank you. I was trying to make sure I minimize things. But thank you so much for the opportunity. This is a discussion from many variations, many facets, many levels. So I pray that you continue it. It is very important. And the beauty of social media is you can sit down, you can catch it on replay, you can really digest it, and you can connect with some amazing people that you might otherwise have never encountered in this life. Leave nothing to chance about your stability of your children. And it is my prayer that if it's not myself or maybe you, Dr. Valerie or Dr. Cicely, or whoever it might be, that you recognize and not take it personal when you need assistance and know that God has made us available in a lot of remedies to make that happen. So God bless you all.
Wow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate you. And thank everyone for tuning in. And don't forget to visit www.fromthesoulofAwoman.com. And remember, it's not about us, it's about these babies. These babies that will grow up to be teenagers and they will be adults. There are children, and we need to be aware of what affects them. Thank you for tuning in. See you next week.